We have some new info on the Pokemon Go Johto Tour event. If you are a ticket holder for the event, you will unlock this special Masterwork research line in which you will be able to obtain both Apex Shadow Ho-Oh and Apex Shadow Lugia. Just for confirmation, according to the website, if you are a ticket holder, it doesn't matter if you pick the gold version or the silver version, you will be able to obtain both Apex Shadow Lugia and Apex Shadow Ho-Oh. So what's with these Apex Shadow Pokemon? Are they more powerful than normal Shadow Pokemon? No, they will be having the same exact Shadow bonus as a normal Shadow Pokemon. They don't have any additional stats, so the only thing truly different about them is going to be the cosmetics here, where Apex Shadow Ho-Oh has kind of a space swirl going on with some lightning, and then Apex Shadow Lugia's got a spooky flame going on, spookier than the usual Shadow Flames with some lightning. And then to add to this, there's also an additional benefit. They will have their signature attacks, Sacred Fire and Aeroblast, respectively, but plus they'll have additional power. These plus moves they will. So in this video, I'm going to talk about just how good these Apex Shadow Pokemon are, and just how good these plus attacks are as well. And it doesn't stop just there. What if you purify these Apex boys? Then they will be Apex Purified Pokemon with even more powerful plus attacks. So here's the official page for it if you want to check it out yourself, link in the description. Talking about the Johto Tour, giving you the Masterwork research line for these Apex Shadow Pokemon, and info about the plus and plus moves. One thing I want to note before we go further is I downloaded those GIFs from this website, and Lugia's file name is Lugia-2, but Ho-Oh's is Huo-2. So I thought that was kind of funny. It's funny to me at least. We got Huo over here. Why did they make it Huo, not Ho-Oh? Can't tell you. So as you can see, Sacred Fire Plus is going to have an increased base power to 135, up from the original 120. Sacred Fire isn't in the game just yet. It will be releasing with the Ho-Oh raids, the standard Ho-Oh raids with the Johto Tour event. So it's not in the game just now, but power creeping in already with Sacred Fire Plus for the Apex Shadow Ho-Oh, 135 base power. Then if you were to purify Apex Shadow Ho-Oh into Apex Purified Ho-Oh, then it would be 155 base power, which is more base power. But does this base power compete well with the Shadow bonus? Shadow Pokemon having a 20% higher attack stat than non-Shadow Pokemon? Well, that's what this video is going to get into. You also notice that it doesn't change base power for the trainer battles, which is fantastic because it'd be really annoying if this pay-to-win power creep plus stuff influenced trainer battle meta. I really wouldn't be down for that. So Pokemon Go got the hint, and they didn't change it for trainer battles, which is good. And you may also notice that this trainer battle power is higher than the video I did a week ago. Following that video, Niantic actually buffed Magical Leaf and Sacred Fire for PvP content. So now Magical Leaf is an acceptable attack. It's pretty good. It's not much better for Celebi though, so I don't know if I'll do a video talking about how it's interesting for Celebi now, because it really isn't. And then Sacred Fire is actually really good. They not only buffed the base power for trainer battles, but they decreased the energy cost by 5. And above all else, the energy cost going down by 5 was the ticket to make it a viable move for Ho-Oh in Master League PvP. So now it's got that. So I will be doing a follow-up video talking about Ho-Oh and Shadow Ho-Oh for Master League PvP in the near future. So subscribe if you want to see that video. But back to the Apex Pokemon and the plus moves. Scrolling down to Apex Shadow Lugia here, you'll see that the base power is increased to 200 from the original 180, and then if you purify for the plus, it'll increase further to 225. So the question is, these moves, they look stronger, but you also have the Shadow bonus to contend with as well. Are these moves actually better? Should you purify your Apex Shadow Pokemon into Apex Purified Pokemon? And the short answer is no, but if you want some graphs and charts and stuff showing you why they're kind of mediocre, well, you came to the right place. So here we have a chart from GamePress's DPS TDO spreadsheet where I put in the custom moves Sacred Fire Plus and Sacred Fire Plus, and you can see that the Apex Purified Ho-Oh here is not living up to the standard of Shadow Ho-Oh. In fact, Sacred Fire Plus, despite being such a more powerful, overwhelmingly good attack, it's worse / I guess as good as, depending on how you want to look at it, as normal Shadow Ho-Oh with Fire Blast. And is that just because, the shadow bonus is just that strong? And yeah, the answer is the shadow bonus is just that strong. It's a 20% damage increase to all of their attacks, right? So it's not just their charge moves, it's also their fast moves. So you're getting boosted incinerate damage and boosted charge move damage, which overall is, this is kind of the reason why shadow Pokemon are usually better in raids than their standard counterparts to begin with. Now, one thing I think is kind of interesting too is that you'd think that the plus plus versions, like the whole point of that was to put the normal Pokemon more on the level of the shadow Pokemon. But even if you were to isolate the shadow bonus just to the charge move, the plus plus moves don't even seem balanced for that even. Like if you were to multiply the base power of Sacred Fire Plus by 1.2, then you'd have 162, right? But Sacred Fire Plus Plus is 155, which is a lower number than 162. So yeah, no, it's not even balanced. Like it doesn't seem like they were putting the shadow bonus into account when making the plus plus moves. But when you consider the fact that the shadow bonus also boosts the incinerate damage for Sacred Fire Plus Plus to be on the level of Apex Shadow Ho-Oh with the Sacred Fire Plus, then Sacred Fire Plus Plus would need 180 base power, which is a lot higher than 155. So it's just kind of goofy to me because, like, it's the Apex Shadow Pokemon, right? And there's plenty of players out there that are going to think like, oh wow, the plus plus move, that's such a better attack than the plus move. I should purify my Apex Shadow Ho-Oh into an Apex Purified Ho-Oh. But the result of that is just going to be that they're going to have a weaker Pokemon for raids. I mean, they will, free its heart from the darkness and teach it to love again or whatever. But it will be a significantly worse Pokemon for raids for it, which is just really counterintuitive. So unless they're going to be doing some sort of like Apex Purified damage bonus that they haven't officially announced yet for raids, then it doesn't seem like there's any reason whatsoever to purify your Apex Shadow Ho-Oh. Another thing that might be interesting to you, curious thing here, is how is Brave Bird better than Sacred Fire Plus? I mean, Brave Bird's really good, but it does have 5 less base power than Sacred Fire Plus has. I mean, Brave Bird's really freaking good. And they both have 100 energy costs. So why is Sacred Fire Plus worse than Brave Bird if Brave Bird is the lower damaging attack? And that just has to do with the longer animation time of Sacred Fire Plus. So because it has a longer animation time, Brave Bird hits faster and it has an earlier activation window, which means if you get KO'd mid-charge move, the damage of Brave Bird is more likely to register, so extra fast moves, damage more likely to register. So on average, Brave Bird against the same type effectiveness level opponent is going to be better than the Sacred Fire Plus. So now that we know that Apex Shadow Ho-Oh is better than Apex Purified Ho-Oh, despite Sacred Fire Plus looking like a weaker attack than Sacred Fire Plus Plus, well, how does Apex Shadow Ho-Oh compare to other Fire-type Pokemon in the raid meta? And using the DPS TDO spreadsheet on GamePress here, sorting the table by DPS to the third power times TDO, which is a good metric for a Pokemon's overall raid goodness, favoring DPS, favoring the raid timer, of course. You can see that it's number 2. It's pretty good. It's second only to Shadow Entei. And when you consider that it has a different type effectiveness profile, different resistances, in some raids, especially when you consider that Fire-type Pokemon target like Grass and Bug-type Pokemon, Shadow Ho-Oh could pull ahead of Shadow Entei in performance. And then when you consider that Shadow Ho-Oh does have some really good clout in Master League PvP compared to Shadow Entei, which doesn't, then, I'd say overall Shadow Ho-Oh, if you had to pick one or the other, would overall be the wiser Stardust investment here. And yeah, pulls ahead of Reshiram, which is pretty impressive. Never expected, Shadow Ho-Oh to ever do that, but Sacred Fire Plus does allow it to pull just ahead of Reshiram. Reshiram's not out of a job. I mean, you can only get one Apex Shadow Ho-Oh to begin with, so what else are you going to use for the raid, right? So Reshiram's still really good, also has a different resistance profile, so that's good. And then if you're more concerned about the DPS side of things, then the majority of other Shadow Fire-type Pokemon, they are going to have higher DPS than Shadow Ho-Oh does, but when it comes to the tankiness combined with the DPS, favoring the DPS because it's to the third power there, yeah, Shadow Ho-Oh looking pretty good. Now, this isn't like a must-have Pokemon for raids, and I'd say in the current raid meta, there are no must-have Pokemon for raids, but this is like a nice little perk to have alongside it. It's got a cool little Shadow Aura going on with it too, and then you can also use it in Master League PvP with the cool Shadow Aura, so I'd say overall, that's pretty cute. Is it going to inspire me to buy the ticket for the event here? Well, I haven't bought it yet, and I'm still probably not going to buy it, but kind of nice, kind of nice. Hopefully they give this to everybody eventually, like they usually do with their special event Pokemon. I mean, they haven't done it with Shiny Mew yet, but they've done it with everything else. So I'm thinking that free-to-play type players will get a little Apex Shadow action in the near future, but that is yet to be confirmed. And considering that we don't have Shiny Mew yet, maybe it never will happen. And when it comes to Apex Shadow Lugia and Apex Purified Lugia, it's kind of the same situation as with Ho-Oh over there, and that is because of the Shadow bonus, boosting not only the charge move damage, but the fast move damage, and then when you consider the fact that the charge move damage isn't even balanced for, like, considering that you're getting the extra Shadow bonus to your charge move, yeah, no, Apex Shadow Lugia definitely going to be the better raid attacker than the Apex Purified Lugia. When it comes to comparing Apex Lugia here, or Lugia in general, to other raid attackers, using Aeroblast at least, it's a little bit tricky because typically in a raid, you want to be hitting the opponent with super effective fast move and charge move damage, and usually you're using the same exact type of attack to achieve this because it's easier that way, right? But Lugia here, despite having a big flying type charge move in Aeroblast, it doesn't have a flying type fast move. It doesn't even have hidden power to maybe have a better flying type fast move. So it's kind of awkward, right? It has to use extra sensory. So then you have to compare it in like unique circumstances where it makes sense. So this chart is up against a fighting type opponent in the DPS TDO spreadsheet. That's also why the DPS numbers are going to be much higher than what you saw in the previous chart, because we're now dealing super effective damage to the opponent that we're up against. And yeah, you can see here that comparing them, DPS to the third power times TDO, Apex Shadow Lugia with the Aeroblast Plus is basically on top. Now obviously Mewtwo with its insanely powerful Side Strike, and then Shadow Mewtwo, not Apex Shadow Mewtwo mind you, just normal Shadow Mewtwo with normal Side Strike, not Side Strike Plus or Plus Plus, of course. But yeah, both these two Pokemon are just way better for fighting type raid bosses. Shadow Lugia does have a different resistance profile going on, so it could be even tankier. And if you're powering up like a multitude of Pokemon for raids, I think it is kind of nice as like an anchor Pokemon to try to help prevent you from relobbying, so you don't take a DPS hit from having to relobby. So there are benefits to having that anchor type Pokemon. But just seeing how like overwhelmingly better Mewtwo and Shadow Mewtwo are as fighting type counters, it doesn't seem like there's as big of a pull factor to power up Shadow Lugia for raids, or I guess in this case Apex Shadow Lugia for raids. And if you want another like effective perspective on the the extra sensory Aeroblast situation, this is compared against a grass type opponent with windy weather. So while extra sensory isn't getting a type effectiveness bonus against a grass type raid opponent, the windy weather boosts both psychic and flying type damage, so that kind of allows extra sensory to close that gap a little bit. So there are other raid type opponents where this circumstance makes sense, right? I'm just using this one as an example because I do not have the time to go over every single use case scenario for Shadow Lugia having good damage, right? This is just one of them. At any rate, under this set of circumstances, you can see that, yeah, Apex Shadow Lugia with the Aeroblast is still looking pretty good, but against opponents where you really want to be doing like flying or fire type damage, yeah, Shadow Moltres, Shadow Honchkrow, and even Shadow Ho-Oh with the Brave Bird ends up outperforming the Apex Shadow Lugia here. And while Apex Shadow Lugia does have a lower DPS to the third power times TDO compared to these three other Pokemon, it is worth noting that it does have a much higher TDO, so it could still fill that like anchor role pretty well. But I'd say the competition is pretty fierce. And even though it does have a different resistance profile than these other flying type Pokemon, when you're comparing like grass and like bug type Pokemon, which aren't the only Pokemon raid bosses where this scenario makes sense, fire type is kind of like a better secondary type for that situation. So maybe if they have rock attacks, then Shadow Lugia can step up to the plate a little bit more. But yeah, it's nice. It's nice. So I'd say between the two, if you were like forced to choose, which apparently we aren't forced to choose, ticket holders will get both of them. If you were to power up just one for raids, I'd say Ho-Oh, Apex Shadow Ho-Oh would probably be the better investment. But both Shadow Ho-Oh and Shadow Lugia are good in Master League PvP, so powering up both of them, especially if you haven't powered up a Shadow Lugia yet for Master League PvP, could be a good idea. And then once again, I will be doing a video in the near future on Sacred Fire Ho-Oh, which also talks about Shadow Ho-Oh with Sacred Fire in Master League PvP, and I'll talk about like the minimum stat checks that you're going to want to look out for those Pokemon as well, because obviously, you know, breakpoints, not having 100% IVs can make or break a Pokemon in PvP. One thing I think is kind of goofy about the Apex situation too is like, I feel like it makes sense for the Apex Pokemon to be like Hundos, because they're Apex Pokemon, especially when you consider that the Shadow bonus and their stats aren't any different from the normals. Like, if they're supposed to be more powerful, you'd think they'd be Hundos, but no confirmation or denial yet if Apex Pokemon will be guaranteed Hundos or not. I just think it's goofy that they probably won't be. They're just super goofy. So a brief summary of the situation. The Apex Shadow Pokemon do appear to be pretty powerful for raid content, but they're not so overwhelmingly powerful that you're just going to become the raid boss yourself if you happen to have them. So if you're on the fence about buying the Johto Tour ticket, I don't think this is like a meta push for you to do it. Although these Pokemon do look pretty cool, I hope free-to-play players like myself now are able to obtain these Pokemon in the future. That'd be pretty nice, but no confirmation on that either. And then as far as purifying them or not, for raid content, I guess you would lose out on the damage bonus, but if the Apex Pokemon do not come out as Hundos, and purifying them could get you a Hundo, and you don't already have them powered up for Master League PvP, and I guess maybe if the Apex purified Pokemon had like a really cool, unique, you know, cosmetic change to them themselves, then I think that'd be pretty dope. Does Shadow Mewtwo purified? Does purified Mewtwo look any different? Who here is purified their Shadow Mewtwo? I don't know. At any rate, if you have any questions on this content, comment below. Let me know what's up. I'll be happy to help you out. If you enjoyed this kind of content, you want to see more like it, maybe you want to know how good Sacred Fire is in Master League PvP, well, make sure to subscribe to SwagTips. SwagTips. I'd also like to give a special shout out to these Patreon supporters. If you want to support Swagman on Patreon, link in the description. Even with the increased power of Sacred Fire ++, I need to have my chart up actually. I can't. There's going to be a lot of numbers I got to talk about.